The verse of the day is Genesis 26:7-8, and it says, "When the men who lived there asked Isaac about his wife, Rebekah, he said, 'She is my sister.' He was afraid to say, 'She is my wife.' He thought, 'They will kill me to get her because she is so beautiful.' But sometime later, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out his window and saw Isaac caressing Rebekah." The title of today's portion of scripture is called Isaac Deceives Abimelech. And so we're in the same paragraph that we talked about yesterday, where God was promising Isaac blessings because of Abraham's faith. And now we're going into a similar story that we kind of covered a little bit yesterday, how Isaac fell into the same pattern as Abraham in that he also lied to Abimelech about his wife being his sister. So it highlights the importance of not always following the patterns of those who seem to be good people in every area, because everyone makes bad judgment, and also the generational issues and how things get passed down, and how Isaac might have learned certain things from Abraham that now he's functioning in. Something that I think other people probably have thought before is, okay, if God said that Abraham obeyed everything and he did everything right, his faith was great, but he still lied about his wife being his sister, and he still fell into sin, how was he considered so righteous? And it goes back to how Abraham believed God. It was his belief in what God said and how he obeyed through his actions that qualified his faith, that made him righteous in God's eyes. And so, although there were moments of him falling short and lying and having fear, he still was faithful to follow God's commands. When he said, leave your father's house, when he said, sacrifice your son, he still did those things. So he was still functioning in obedience, but still had lack of judgment along the way, which I think is really encouraging for you and I, because how often do we experience a lack of judgment? How often do we have fear or fall into lies sometimes and not doing everything right? But if we continue to fight for obedience and to follow how God calls us to live, that's going to make or break our walk. That's going to help us continue to get redirected and stay in the path that God is paving for us. And I was trying to pick this week's scripture. This verse stuck out to me because of the very last sentence. It says, "But sometime later, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out his window and saw Isaac caressing Rebekah." That immediately communicated to me that everything that is hidden ultimately comes to the light. And I have experienced that so many times in my life, where deceit or certain people have lied. Everything eventually comes to the light. And I think that's important for us to understand when we do lie or when we do keep things hidden or in the dark. God reveals everything. Eventually, it will come to the light in one way or another. If you go back to the story where Abraham deceives Abimelech, God had given him a dream revealing that Sarah was his wife. So he intervened in the midst of Abraham's lie and communicated to Abimelech that, whoa, don't take Sarah. Sarah's already married. This is a warning to you so that you don't fall into sin, because I know you didn't know. I know you weren't aware. In chapter 20, verse 6, it says, "In the dream, God responded, 'Yes, I know you are innocent. That's why I kept you from sinning against me, and why I did not let you touch her. Now return the woman to her husband, and he will pray for you, for he is a prophet. Then you will live. But if you don't return her to him, you can be sure that you and all your people will die.'" So God intervenes sometimes because he knows that people's lies and decisions can bring harm to more than just them. It can bear consequences to other people, and would have if Abimelech would have taken Sarah as his wife, even though she was already married. But God intervened and brought things to the light and made it clear. So I think it's super interesting how in both situations with Isaac and Abraham, when they both lied, the truth came to the light. God revealed it to him through Abraham. And with Isaac, he let Abimelech catch Isaac caressing Rebekah, and that made him aware of really what their relationship was all about. And so I think that's encouraging for you and I too, to trust that instinct that sometimes we get when we witness things that look a little fishy, to actually pay attention to it, because God reveals things to us to catch our attention. He reveals things to us to give us discernment about the things that we're walking through. I think today's story is a perfect example of what happens when you assume and when you let fear take over through your assumptions, because obviously Abraham and Isaac both feared a result that wouldn't have happened, because Abimelech both times was like, what are you doing? I don't want to fall into sin. I don't want to take your wife if she's your wife. And so sometimes we make up things in our mind because fear drives us to do that, when that's not even the outcome that's coming our way if we were to stay truthful. I also think today's story is a perfect example of what happens when you have a feeling and you act on it. So if you have a feeling of fear, oh no, what if he takes my wife? I'm afraid that he's going to kill me because my wife is beautiful. So they both acted on that feeling of fear and fell into sin through lying. If they would have just taken their feeling of fear and consulted God with it and trusted God with it and remained truthful, then they wouldn't have walked into a sinful action, and it would have spared them a conflict that would have never happened. Something that I used to believe was, in order to have great faith, you don't have fear. You learn to completely get rid of the fear. But as I've continued to walk with God for a minute now, I've come to realize that faith isn't the absence of fear. It's knowing that your faith is more important than the fear. So whatever fear or lie the enemy is going to whisper in your ear, it may always be there. The little voice might always be there. But if you continue to be obedient and shut that voice out and follow your faith over the fear, that's how you're going to maintain your faith. That's how you're going to stay strong. That's how you're going to become great in God's eyes, because you're going to be paying attention to God's voice over the enemy's voice. And that's how God is going to learn how to trust you, because he knows that no matter what lie the enemy feeds you, you're choosing faith. You're choosing what God says and believing what God says. Today's verse teaches us a lot. It teaches us how undealt pain and things within our heart get passed down to our children generationally. It teaches us that we shouldn't assume. It teaches us that we need to follow our faith over our feelings, which is a common theme throughout the book of Genesis. And it teaches us that everything eventually comes to the light. God reveals everything. And so if we continue to keep everything in the light, that's where we're going to stay safe. And that's how God's going to heal us and restore us and redeem anything that we may have fallen into or that we may be tempted to fall into. Okay?